Hi, welcome back. Today I'm going to be sharing 3 new habits to help you build a healthy relationship with your partner that I believe are underrated. And if you're new here, I'm Alex, a certified life and relationship coach and the face behind Toolbox for Love. I've been with my now husband Dennis for over 15 years, and this is a place where I share what I've learned and what I continue to learn to help you build a relationship that actually feels good to be in. And just like in part 1 of the series, I'll explain what these different habits are, how you can implement them in your life. I'll share how I've adopted them and how you can adopt them too. These habits are designed to help you and your partner function better as a couple, and they're designed to be sustainable, meaning that if you implement them, you should see success in the long run. Alright, the first habit is learning to speak your partner's dialects. A big mistake we make in relationships is loving someone the way we want to be loved back, or loving them the way we think they want to be loved. If you're with a loving partner and you're making efforts in the relationship, but you feel like those efforts aren't reciprocated or aren't acknowledged, there's a big chance that you need to clarify your dialects. Dialects are an extension of love languages. And if you're not familiar with love languages, they are how you and your partner prefer to give and receive love. How I express and receive love might be very different from you. It's unique to every person. The concept of love languages was introduced by the well-known author, speaker, and relationship counselor called Gary Chapman. According to him, there are 5 main love languages. You have words of affirmation, physical touch, receiving gifts, acts of service, and quality time. While these are the 5 that we often hear about, I also believe that these aren't the only ones. I just find it helpful to have a straightforward model to work with because it's easy to grasp and implement. Identifying and speaking each other's love languages is like learning how to communicate so that you understand each other. If you, for example, speak English to someone who only speaks Spanish, you won't understand each other even if you have the best of intentions. You might be able to communicate very briefly, let's say through hand gestures or basic words, but you won't go very far in the long run. That's how essential it is to know your love languages so that you feel loved, understood, and appreciated. One of our basic human needs is a need to feel loved and connected. If we don't feel that love and connection in a relationship, we will start to have unmet needs, and unmet needs puts the relationship at risk. People check out of relationships when their needs aren't being met. That might look like staying in the relationship but not making efforts anymore, getting into frequent fights that leave you both feeling disconnected, or even leaving the relationship. Now, there's a lot of hype around love languages and not enough around dialects. And dialects are the specific way that you give and receive love. For example, when I first introduced the concept of love languages to Dennis about 2 years into our relationship, I remember him identifying his love language as being quality time. That was his preferred way to feel loved. He loved to spend time together, he loved to do things, and I assumed that every time we spent time together, that was quality time. Then when I was still at my corporate job and we were doing long distance, I would sometimes call him to catch up at the end of the day while I was doing my groceries, and I would sometimes have to interrupt the conversation if I was looking for something or speaking to the cashier. I thought that that was us spending quality time together because to me, the longer we spend together, the better. But that's not how he saw it. He would get really annoyed and I wouldn't get why until I understood that to him, a 5-minute uninterrupted conversation was way more valuable than a potentially interrupted 30-minute call. Dialects are the specific way we feel loved. It's how we specifically define, for example, quality time. If we hadn't clarified our dialects, we would have stayed in that cycle and would have continued to build up resentment, frustration, and disappointment. And what I typically see is that there comes a point where one person is so fed up and feels like it's too late to work on things that they check out of the relationship. If I take a client's example, this is a same-sex couple, and for the sake of the example, I'll call them Jessica and Sarah. Sarah mentioned that she didn't truly feel loved and valued, and Jessica argued that she made tons of efforts, so she was feeling super confused, very exhausted, and was even considering leaving the relationship because it just felt too complicated. When we clarified what love languages and dialects were, Sarah identified her love language as being physical touch. And when it came to dialects, she said that she really valued, for example, resting her head on Jessica's lap as they were watching TV, or sitting next to each other when they were with friends. So being in close proximity is what she valued the most. The thing is that all along, Jessica thought that when Sarah said that she really valued physical touch, that it meant intimate moments and sex. So clarifying what Sarah really needed and doing the same for Jessica was a huge light bulb moment. It wasn't that they had bad intentions or didn't want the relationship to work. It was that they were making efforts but in the wrong place, and that was a big reason why they were considering breaking up. That's a situation that most of my clients are in when we start working together. They're on that edge. In Sarah and Jessica's case, intimate moments were important to Sarah, but not as important as the other ways that she felt loved through physical touch. So this helped them recalibrate and align on what they really needed for them to truly be happy together. There are so many ways we can love someone, so we need to clarify what we each need and be so specific that it leaves no room for confusion. If we don't do that, one or both people will accumulate frustration because they will have unmet needs. And again, unmet needs leads to disconnection. There are common beliefs that our partners should know what we need, that they should should make us feel loved in 1,000 different ways because we don't want to settle for less. And that if they wanted to, they would. And yes, I'm all for being with someone who makes efforts and is willing to go the extra mile, but we can't expect someone to mind read. We can't expect them to know exactly what we need every time we need it. That's just not fair. And even when we express what we need, we have to get specific. It doesn't make it less genuine to express that. It actually helps you and your partner work in the right direction, and it gives the other person a chance to show up. Being clear with what you need is you doing yourself a favor. And if you communicate what it is that you need, you have a partner who's willing to make that work and who actually shows signs of efforts. You might still have to repeat yourself from time to time and repeat what it is that you need because they just can't anticipate your needs every single time. Again, they can't mind read. And maybe you need to repeat yourself a little bit more often because what you're asking for doesn't come naturally to them. For example, there are moments in my day where I could use a hug, and when I sense that, I ask Dennis for it. I literally ask him if he can give me a big hug. And I ask him because it gives him a chance to love me the way I want to be loved in that moment. It increases my chances of getting what I need, and it gives Dennis clarity on how he can support me best, as well as a chance to show up. If we want to build a healthy relationship, we need to drop the belief that it's less genuine to ask for what it is that we need. We need to communicate our needs and be specific. The more specific we are, the better. The next time you feel frustrated, resentful, and disconnected from your partner, honestly ask yourself how clear you've been on what it is that you need in order to feel loved and how you've specifically defined that. You and your partner both need to be willing to make things work, but only making efforts isn't enough. You also need to know where you're putting your efforts. If you need to hear words of affirmation from your partner and they mainly show love through gifts, you can appreciate their efforts, but you will still feel like something is lacking. And if they express loving words, but you specifically light up when you hear compliments, then that's something you get to clarify as well. To develop the habit of speaking each other's dialects, here's what you can do. Pick 1 or 2 things that you would love to see more from your partner, and the key here is not to list 50 different things. You don't want to make the task impossible either. Then focus on painting such a clear picture of what it is that you need that it's hard to miss. If your partner isn't willing to make those efforts, then that's a different story. Your job, so what you can do and what's in your control, is to paint that clear picture. And same for your partner. If you notice that they're shutting down, they're pulling away, they're voicing concerns, ask them what would make them feel more loved and try to clarify what they mean as much as possible. Don't assume that you know what they mean. You and your partner need to know where you aim when you make efforts. And you do that by clarifying how you feel most loved. If not, you're not giving yourselves a fair chance to build a healthy, loving, and fulfilling relationship. It just becomes this really frustrating guessing game. My masterclass called Love Languages is where I go in depth into what love languages are, what dialects are, how to identify them in your situation, and how to use them to your advantage. So I'll link it in the description if you want to check it out. The second habit is setting healthy boundaries with the relationship content that we consume. Today we have so much access to information when it comes to relationships. We can literally type stuff on the internet and have answers on our fingertips. We can follow people for free on social media and consume their content. We can read books, we can take courses, we can have a therapist, a coach, and we can even reach out to people for advice. The thing is that not only do we have access to a ton of relationship content, but the advice can be different and even conflicting. One minute you hear that you should do things one way in your relationship, and the other you hear that you should do things another way. I'm all for seeking support, having access to information, following other people's content, but it can get very confusing and overwhelming to have too much information or to have information that's different. We sometimes end up not knowing what to listen to anymore and develop a sense of confusion because what if we're not doing things the right way? So we start doubting ourselves and doubting the relationship. The reality is that context matters and every situation is unique. What works for me might not work for you. One piece of advice might generally be true, but it might not apply to your specific situation because there are other factors to consider as well. For example, if you hear that having doubts is a sign that you should leave the relationship, maybe yes, maybe no. It depends why the doubts are there. Or if you hear that long distance relationships don't work, some do, some don't. It depends so much on what you and your partner want and your situation. I remember a client whose fiance had just left him because she had read a post on a very popular Instagram account that listed the signs of an unhealthy relationship, and based on that, she decided to break off the engagement. We need to set healthy boundaries with the content that we consume so that when we hear a piece of advice, we can decide if it applies to us or not. And that's regardless of if that advice comes from the internet, a trusted friend, or a family member. We also need to set healthy boundaries so that when we see someone's highlight reel, we can remind ourselves that that is one angle of the relationship and that we don't know everything that's going on behind the scenes because we rarely do. And we need to set healthy boundaries so that we can turn down the volume on the narrative that we should do things a certain way. For example, we should get engaged after X years together, or we should be calling each other X times a week, or we should not do long distance. There are a million ways that you can do things in a relationship. A relationship is unique. It's personal to you and your partner's needs, goals, values, and situation. When Dennis and I were told that we're too different, that it was strange that we waited 10 years to get engaged, and another 3 to get married, that we should be having kids right now, that our long distance relationship wouldn't work. I developed so many doubts, and on top of that, I kept comparing myself to others who were settling so much quicker, and I thought something was wrong with us. That was my personal experience, but I see many clients go through the exact same thing. What helped us get through it was replacing questions like, what should we do? Or what is the right way to do things? With what's going on for us? What do we want? And what works for us? It wasn't an easy process, and we didn't ask ourselves these questions from the beginning, but when we started to focus on what it is that we wanted in our relationship and what worked for us, we entered a process called co-creation. And that's the process of creating a relationship that works for us, that's unique to us, and that we love to be in. No relationship is identical to yours, and again, context matters. I can still listen to other people's advice and opinions, but at the end of the day, what matters is that I get to decide what I take in and what isn't helpful based on my circumstances. Okay, quick story time. Just about a year ago, I was told by someone that I needed to fix something in my marriage because, in their opinion, my way of doing things with Dennis wasn't normal in a healthy, stable relationship. For context, this is someone close to me and who has good intentions. They had called me to catch up, and when they asked how Dennis was, I said he was good, that he was sleeping, and that he had gone to bed late because he loves to stay up at night. I explained that we have different sleeping habits, that I'm the early bird and he's more of the night owl, so I was alone getting in some work done and soon going for my walk before he woke up. From this person's perspective, we should be going to sleep and waking up at the same time because that's what normal couples do. I responded that I was okay with our different sleeping habits and that we have other moments in the day where we connect. And still she continued to say that I needed to fix this issue. Years ago, that would have caused me to spiral into doubts, especially since Dennis and I are very different in other areas as well. After some back and forth, she finally dropped the ball and was reassured that I was okay with how we do things. To be honest, I left the call feeling a bit heavy in my chest. That's where I typically feel my emotions, because it reminded me of the times that I wondered if I was doing the right things in my relationship based on other people's opinions. If there's one thing that I've learned from my 15-year relationship with Dennis, it's that stability isn't created by living a life on other people's terms and beliefs. Every situation is unique and there's no one way to do things. Stability comes from you and your partner both defining what works best for you and your situation. Again, that process is called co-creation. And before we go into the next habit, I want you to imagine for a second that your relationship is like a garden. Like a garden, it requires attention, nurturing, and cultivation to flourish. While there's a ton of gardening information out there, factors like climate, soil type, sunlight exposure, and available space all influence what will thrive in your garden. Plus, we each have personal preferences as to what we want in that garden. Maybe I want roses and you want tulips. So if there's one question I encourage you and your partner to ask yourselves more, it's what do we want? Because at the end of the day, what matters the most is that you are okay with how you do things. The third habit is the art of detachment. We cannot want something for our partner more than they want it for themselves. We can't force them to do something, and we can't make changes for them because we don't control them. And while they can agree to make efforts to improve something that we might have discussed, we don't want them to do something if it's against their will just because we're asking for it. They need to be intrinsically motivated. If not, they will eventually be tired of proving themselves to us and will build up resentment. And resentment is one of the biggest relationship killers. It leads to disconnection. We attract healthy love when we don't beg or cling for someone's love, when we don't cling for their attention and efforts, when we don't try to change them, when we stop falling in love with someone's potential, and when we stop hoping for them to be different down the line. If you stay together, it's because you're both willing to make it work. You're both adding value to each other's lives, and you're clear on what you want. It's not one-sided. One of my earliest experiences of detachment is when I started dating Dennis. I was exploring smoking cigarettes because my friends had started to smoke. When Dennis found out, he told me that he didn't want to date a smoker. And while he didn't try to force me to stop, he did voice that expectation and told me that that was a non-negotiable. It was either him or smoking. At the time, I thought it was a really harsh decision to make, but looking back, I get that that was a non-negotiable for him. As much as he wanted us to work, he knew that if he didn't voice that non-negotiable, and in my example, let me smoke even if he wasn't okay with it, that would have just led to resentment. That was him being capable of detaching from the outcome, detaching from my response. He voiced a non-negotiable and then let me choose. Or when I was ready to walk away from Dennis 2 years into our relationship, that was a big wake-up call. I didn't threaten to leave the relationship to manipulate him. I called him to say that I was ending things because I was unhappy. I was detached from the outcome because in my mind we couldn't continue like this. We were constantly fighting, we felt misunderstood and taken for granted. Me being ready to walk away is a form of detachment. That made him realize, oh, she won't just stick around no matter what. And it's the same with me in my previous example. I'm not saying it was easy and that you should always be willing to walk away, but if I didn't have that sense of detachment, we would have stayed in a situation that made us both really unhappy. So that call helped us reconsider what needed to happen for us to stay together. I couldn't force him to change things that were bothering me, and I also couldn't force him to stay in the relationship. It's up to me to voice my expectations, my needs, and my concerns in a constructive way, but then it's up to him to choose what he does with the info that I give him. Only then can we look at finding agreements and discussing what we each need in the day-to-day moments. You master the art of detachment when 1, you acknowledge that you can't control your partner. 2, you don't try to control them, force them to change, or hope that they will change. And 3, you have the courage to voice your needs, voice your boundaries, voice your concerns in healthy ways without knowing how that information will be received. You do it because you want a healthy, fulfilling relationship, and you want to give your partner a chance to meet you halfway. If your partner isn't willing to listen to you, to change something for their relationship to work, and to take accountability, then the question becomes, what is it that I'm willing to tolerate moving forward? You're able to have a healthy sense of detachment when you're very clear on what you're willing and not willing to tolerate in a relationship. Knowing that is a form of self-respect and enables you to be in a relationship that's good for you. You can be tolerant, flexible, and patient and still know what you're not willing to tolerate. It can be scary, especially if you deeply love your partner. To detach in a healthy way, you need to believe that you deserve to be in a loving, fulfilling relationship, that you're worthy as a human being, and that you'll be okay no matter what. As much as you can value the relationship or how things were before, your peace of mind, your integrity, and your happiness are even more of a priority, and you let that guide your actions. If I tolerate too much, I have little to no sense of detachment. That means that I want the relationship to work at all costs. And when that happens, there is a high chance that I'm tolerating things that aren't good for me. And if I'm not tolerant or flexible enough, I'm too detached. Being too detached makes it harder to connect with my partner. They might start to detach as well, and there's a chance that I will leave the relationship when things don't go my way. Healthy detachment is somewhere in the middle. To help you develop that habit, you can ask yourself these questions. First, what can I do about a situation versus what is out of my control? Then, what is it costing me to try to control the outcome of a situation or try to get my partner to do something? Maybe that's costing me my peace of mind. Maybe I'm starting to lose myself, or maybe that's pushing my partner away. Then, if I truly believed that I was worthy and deserving of a healthy relationship, what would I choose to do in XYZ situation? Then, in what areas am I not satisfied about my relationship, and what am I doing about that? Then, if I'm not happy about a situation and my friend were in the same boat, what would I advise them to do? And if my own kid had the same relationship that I have today, would I be happy for them? Then if I want to feel good and satisfied, what am I not willing to tolerate? Then what do I need for the relationship to work? And what would need to happen for me to walk away? And 10, how much of what I need and what I'm not willing to tolerate has been communicated to my partner in a constructive way? All right, I hope these 3 habits help you navigate love feeling empowered and not confused, and help you take steps towards building a healthy, loving, and fulfilling relationship with your partner. There's a part 1 to this series, and subscribe if you want to be notified for the next parts that are coming up. In the meantime, I'd love to know what you've learned from this and what you plan to implement. As always, thank you so much for watching and for being here. See you in the next one.